These are the 5 scariest Simpsons episodes of all time. The first episode is Bart of Darkness, a piece that starts out very lighthearted but becomes darker over time. The episode starts during a particularly hot Springfield summer. The Simpsons attempt to cool down dressed in bathing suits, using multiple fans, and even trying to use their fridge as AC, all of which fail. It isn't until the sound of the ice cream truck is heard that any hope fills Bart and Lisa, but that hope is quickly extinguished when they realize that there's no ice cream. Luckily, the pool mobile shows up, but even then is just a tease, as it's only budgeted for 1 day of use. Bart and Lisa return home with a new demand for their dad. They want a pool, and if they don't get it, it'll be a very annoying summer for Homer. After obtaining the materials, and turning it into a barn first, the Simpsons finally have a pool, which doesn't take long for the other kids of Springfield to figure out. Bart climbs on top of his treehouse during one of these pool parties to discuss the safety rules. They encourage him to jump, to which he agrees immediately. This is where Nelson jumps in to tell Bart,
"Your epidermis is showing!"
This causes Bart to become distracted, and instead of jumping into the pool, he falls from the top of the treehouse to the ground, leaving him with a broken leg, and no hope of using the pool for the rest of the summer. The next day, we see Bart next to the pool, watching the other kids play. He asks for them to sign his cast and even asks Milhouse if he'll spend time with them outside of the pool for a while. But everyone is too busy swimming. Even Lisa, who feels bad for him, is drawn back to the pool by the idea of finally having friends. Bart starts spending his time alone in his room, calling everyone traitors. He starts to watch TV, but decides that this gets boring quickly. The next time Marge and Lisa see Bart in his window, they wave, but it's clear that Bart is starting to become isolated and weird. Lisa comes to check on Bart, who insists he's fine. She gives him a telescope and tells her to leave, but it doesn't take long for him to use it. He first looks at the stars, deciding that's boring. He then starts to look in people's houses, but decides all of that is boring too. As he starts to put it away, he hears a woman scream. As he looks through his telescope again, he sees Flanders panicking and saying,
"I've killed her!"
Bart decides it's not what it sounds like and goes to sleep, only to be woken up by the sound of shovel hitting dirt. He looks out of his telescope and sees Ned Flanders digging a grave, calling himself a murderer. Bart is starting to be convinced that Flanders might have killed Maude, and who could blame him? The next morning, he overhears Rod and Todd talking with their father about their mother being with God, and how they'll be there soon enough. At this point, Bart is fully convinced, and attempts to tell his parents, but they don't believe him. Meanwhile, the kids leave Lisa and her pool for a better pool elsewhere. She goes to apologize to Bart, who says he'll forgive her if she sneaks into Flanders' house. She regretfully agrees, and as she opens the fridge, she finds a bag labeled human head. Luckily, the rest of the words were just frosted over, and it's a head of lettuce. What are the odds? With no real evidence to go on, Lisa starts upstairs to keep looking. Flanders returns home with an axe, and with no way to warn Lisa about it, Bart starts to make his way over there through the pain he feels from walking on his cast. Lisa hides in the attic, but Flanders follows, raising the axe up. Lisa and Bart both scream, but Ned is just putting the axe away in its proper place. He asks what's going on, and everything comes out. Maude was never dead. She was at Bible camp in the country for a week. Ned confesses that he did kill Maude's favorite ficus plant, and buried the remains. Bart remarks that he heard a woman scream, but no one can explain why until the dead ficus plant is dug up by the police. In the end, no one was murdered by an axe or otherwise. It was all just a huge misunderstanding, brought on by mistimed telescope discoveries and the mind of a boy who was far too isolated from his friends and family. Next, we go all the way back to Season 1's Some Chanted Evening, which plays on the fears we have about a stranger being in our homes. The episode starts off with a morning in the Simpsons' house where Marge is dissociating while the rest of the family chows down. She hears the school bus and gets out the lunches she made her kids, but they take money out of her wallet instead. Homer realizes he's late and scrambles to get his things. As he comes back toward the kitchen exit, Marge leans in for a kiss, but he takes her coffee and finishes it, leaving her alone shortly after. There'll certainly be doghouse consequences for that behavior. The radio advertises a radiotherapist that deals with problems on the air. She calls the line and tells them about how she doesn't feel appreciated, and how her husband isn't as romantic as he used to be. The therapist tells her he doesn't appreciate her and isn't treating her like a wife, but as a mother. He goes on to say,
And if he doesn't start loving, You will be leaving.
Marge is determined and agrees, but doesn't know that Homer has heard everything on the radio while he was at work. He slinks off to Moe's after work to avoid his fate, and Moe asks if he's okay and asks if something is happening at work. Homer says Marge is going to leave him because he's a pig, which Moe and the others agree he is. Moe says they're all pigs and goes on to tell him,
Once in a while, we can crawl out of slop, hose ourselves off, and act like human beings.
Homer and Moe make a plan for Homer to take Marge out to dinner and dancing, to buy her flowers, and to take her to a fancy motel for the evening. He leaves determined and buys a rose and chocolates before returning home to see an extremely angry Marge waiting for him. He gives her the gifts and tells her that he loves her. She accepts immediately and says she loves him too. He unveils his full plan for their night to her, and while she's excited, she asks about a babysitter. The two call an agency, and at first they deny them, but they call back as the Simpsons to get a babysitter to arrive. Pretty smart move for Homer, even if the names were close to each other. It doesn't take long for the babysitter, Miss Botts, to get there. Homer tells Bart to help her with her suitcases, but she gets anxious and says she'll handle them. Marge tells her to put Maggie down immediately, but Lisa and Bart can stay up and watch the happy little elves. Bart argues with her and she gets angry with him, telling him he'll listen or she'll do something to him. Bart stays silent while Miss Botts puts Maggie down, but as soon as she's out of the room, he turns on the TV, changing the channel to America's Most Armed and Dangerous. On this program, they hear about the babysitter bandit, who enters homes disguised as a babysitter before tying up the children and robbing the families blind. They reveal this bandit to be Lucille Bachowski, and the photo that goes with it is none other than Lisa and Bart's own babysitter. The two panic as they see the photo, which then cuts to Miss Botts, who is holding a rope. They run away with Bart heading to the basement, and Lisa heading to the kitchen to call the program they'd just watched. Miss Botts heads downstairs to look for Bart, but finds a cabinet full of pickled vegetables. Bart attempts to knock her out with a bowling ball, but misses and falls. She finds Lisa under a table, trying to call the station again. Once they're both tied up, she puts back on the happy little elves and starts to trash the house. This wakes up Maggie, who sneaks by and unties Lisa and Bart. They come up with a plan to have Maggie go into the babysitter's view before crawling into another room, where Bart knocks her unconscious with a baseball bat and ties her up. Marge and Homer have had a nice night of dinner and dancing, and are at the motel when Marge decides to call home. When they get no answer, they return home. They find Miss Botts tied up and untie her, assuming that Bart was being a terror. They pay her triple not to press charges, and she makes her escape. The scariest part of this episode is that she's never caught, and lives free to strike other families in the future. Next on our list is The Frying Game, which starts with Homer getting his wife a koi pond for their anniversary, and it doesn't take long for her and Lisa to start meditating in peace and quiet. That is, until a caterpillar starts to scream in their koi pond. Homer tries to step on it, but an Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, agent stops him, telling him this screamapillar is endangered, and now Homer's responsibility since it's chosen their backyard as its home. The family starts to take care of this annoying little insect by feeding it, making sure no animals attack it, and even reading it a bedtime story. When reading, Homer accidentally squishes it under a book, and it stops screaming and moving. In an attempt to cover up what he did, Homer tries to bury it, but gets caught by the EPA. Just as all looks lost, the bug starts screaming in the dirt. It's alive! However, Homer is still charged for attempted insecticide and is sentenced to community service. The next scene, we see Homer in a Meals on Wheels truck as he starts to fulfill his community service duties. He stops at a house which looks haunted and enters to deliver the meal. He leaves the meal on the table and turns to leave, but runs into an old lady wielding an axe. He screams and runs off to hide in a closet, where he finds a skeleton. The old lady finds him and explains that the skeleton is a Halloween costume and that the axe is to cut through the tough steaks she gets. At that point, maybe just don't eat the steaks. Homer relaxes as she offers him her meal, and the two start talking. At the end, the woman, known as Mrs. Bellamy, asks if she can call on Homer if she ever needs help. The first time she calls on him is while he's at work. She asks him to come mow her lawn, and he agrees, telling Mr. Burns to cover for him. It doesn't take long for Mrs. Bellamy to start taking advantage of Homer. Marge confronts him and Mrs. Bellamy about this. The woman ends up making Marge feel bad, and it doesn't take long for her to start taking advantage of Marge, too. Who can really blame Marge for falling for this, though? She dresses them up as a maid and butler, and makes them serve her and her friends. As they're cleaning up, they hear her scream in the other room. They find Mrs. Bellamy on the floor with scissors in her back, and a man holding her diamond necklace as he makes his escape out the window. Mrs. Bellamy doesn't make it, and as the Simpsons give their story to Chief Wiggum, it's discovered that the woman's will was recently changed to leave the Simpsons $50,000. It's clear at that point they're prime suspects. Once this gets out, no one wants to associate with them at Moe's or at church. There's even a death tour bus that comes by their house. The police search their home and find Maggie with the diamond necklace. No one suspects Maggie for the crime, but let's be honest, it wouldn't have been the first time she'd shot someone. They're arrested, and during the court day, there isn't much of a defense. They're found guilty and put on death row. Marge tells Homer that she's thinking about how they'll miss the kids growing up, grandchildren, everything they won't be here for. Homer comes forward to the warden and confesses to everything alone. The day finally comes. Homer is marched out of his cell and toward the electric chair. As he's being strapped in, there's a phone call. Things are starting to look up as we heard, "No, Governor, it's not too late," from the policeman, but no such luck. The governor only says he hopes that Homer is a twitcher. The thumbs up is given, the switch is pulled, and it's all a prank. Homer is the latest victim on the show Frame Up. They reveal Mrs. Bellamy to be Carmen Electra, and the guy with braces is someone involved as well. Homer is released and he and Marge get to reunite with each other and their children. Homer is understandably angry, and really, who wouldn't be? This episode is one of the most disturbing episodes on The Simpsons and takes April Fool's Day a bit too far. Next on this list is Season 13's The Blunder Years. And no, Dan Campbell isn't guest starring in this one. It just starts as normally as the rest, with Marge putting away groceries. She realizes she bought the wrong paper towels, but becomes enamored by the mascot of Burley Paper Towels to the point of having a crush on how rugged and manly he is. Homer takes notice of this and gets jealous. And once Marge writes a letter to the Burley Company, that's the final straw. He knows he has to do something. He goes to Flanders' house and calls Marge, pretending to be Chad Sexington, the model for Burley, and says he'll come over for dinner. Even for you, Homer, that's pretty harsh. Bart and Homer revel in Marge's excitement as she gets ready for the model to come. She paints a picture and rolls out paper towels for his entry. The doorbell rings, and the door is Barney, dressed as the Burley mascot. Bart and Homie laugh at Marge, who feels ridiculous, and Lisa shouts at them. To make it up to Marge, Homer takes her and the kids out to dinner and a show. There, they meet the hypnotist, Mesmerino. He first approached Professor Frink, turning him into a professional makeup artist, but turns him back into his nerdy self after proving it works. Homer volunteers next, and Mesmerino makes him do a few impressions that are pretty bad, in all honesty, before commanding him to be his 12-year-old self. At first, everything seems normal as he envisions himself at the old swimming hole with his friends. Then, he starts screaming. Even as Mesmerino stops the illusion, he continues to scream. He doesn't stop, even after going to work the next day. How he hasn't broken a world record at this point is beyond me. He's wheeled home by Lenny and Carl after disrupting work. They think he's being tormented by a repressed memory. Using memory tea, they attempt to dislodge the memory for him to remember. He remembers going hiking with Lenny and Carl. There, they met Moe, who saved them from some bullies. Moe shows up at the Simpson home to help remember the story with them. He remembers they camped out over the stars, and in the morning, they went to the quarry to swim. It's dried out, and they all decide not to jump, except for Homer. Moe thinks the jump traumatized him, but Homer remembers there was more. He tries to figure out why the water was blocked, and sees something blocking the pipe. He gets it free with a stick. The quarry fills with water, and something dumps out onto Homer's lap. It's a body. His family comforts him before they realize that Homer probably stumbled on a murder victim. They set out to solve the mystery by going back to the quarry where Homer had found the body all those years ago. Chief Wiggum meets them there, saying that he saw their car by the gate and thought they were lost hikers. He joins them in their investigation, calling himself a crime buff. They use a grappling hook to try and drag up the body, but after failed attempts, Marge gets an idea. She gets several rolls of Burley paper towels and uses them to suck up all of the water. Maybe that'll be enough to make Homer fall in love with the brand too. With the water gone, the group finds a skeleton at the bottom of the lake. Chief Wiggum decides that the pipe should be their next stop to see where it goes. They find a hatch at the other end, and Homer opens it, and on the other side is Mr. Burns' office. Chief Wiggum says he's under arrest for murder, and Burns explains that he did throw the body of Wayland Smithers Sr. down the hatch, but he didn't murder him and has security footage as proof. The footage shows Burns standing at an alarming control panel. Smithers Sr. arrives, holding a baby Wayland. Smithers Sr. boldly goes into the nuclear chamber to stop the emergency, stating that if he doesn't, it could mean the end of Springfield. He succeeds, but dies in the end, leaving Burns with Smithers Jr. Burns goes on to say that since cover-ups were all the rage, he threw him down the sewer hatch. catch. Smithers Jr. overhears all this and forgives Burns for lying to him, since it was to spare his feelings. The episode shows a horrifying and scary childhood trauma of Homer's, which viewers found disturbing at the time. Next on our list, we have Boy Scouts in the Hood, which also gets freakier as the plot moves forward. It starts out on any normal day with Bart and Milhouse in the arcade. However, it's not long before they run out of money and they're kicked out. With nothing left to do, they sit outside the arcade and punch each other in the arm for fun. That's when a $20 bill that Homer loses ends up at their feet, and the two have found their ticket out of their boredom. They go to the Quickie Mart and order a super squishy with extra syrup. Sounds like every kid's sugar rush dream. Apu says this has never been attempted, but Bart insists. With much struggle and panic, Apu sets out to make the squishy. When drinking the squishy, Milhouse and Bart both go on a crazed sugar high, Broadway style. And while they don't have voices meant for Broadway, the song is catchy nonetheless.
Springfield, Springfield, it's a hell of a town.
The entire scene is a mixture of a montage, song, and sugar-filled hallucination, resulting in Bart waking up in his bed the next morning, not remembering anything. Lisa revealed that he's wearing a junior camper's uniform, and he remembers that he must have joined them the night before. He says that he'll need to find a way to weasel out of the group, since he doesn't want to be seen as a loser. He intends to return it after school, that is, until he finds out that junior campers are excused during class time to attend their patrol meeting. The meeting isn't as tolerable as he thought it would be though, as when he arrives, the leader of the group, Ned Flanders, tells him they'll be bathing the elderly. Bart tries to run away, but is knocked unconscious, and as he awakes, one of the boys is giving him CPR. Nearly fed up with Ned and the other campers, Bart decides he's done with the junior campers for good, and then he learns about the pocket knives they get. Ned tells him he can't have one until he reads through the safety manual and passes the test. Bart decides he doesn't need a pocket knife or the junior campers. On his way home, he realized that it seems like everyone has a knife. Everyone but him. Bart sticks with it, and on top of getting a rubber training knife, he learns how to trap wild animals, which he uses on Homer successfully, twice, and even learns a thing or two about nature and camping. At their next meeting, Ned tells the campers about their annual father and son rafting trip, which Bart dreads, as he realizes Homer will ruin everything. He decides that he'll tell him because Homer will not want to go, but he gets confused and agrees to go. This is the first and last time I think we'll ever see both Bart and Homer overthinking something in the same episode. Homer and Bart are paired with Ned and his son, Rod Flanders. It doesn't take long for Homer to lose the map, and the scariest part of the episode is when they take the wrong route, landing out on the ocean. Ned says they need to fight the current to return to shore, but Homer tells them just to relax and they'll get there. This only drags them further out to sea. After just a few hours, Homer says they're doomed. The four see a seagull, and Ned says they're saved since seagulls only go out to sea to die. The seagull drops into the water, and Homer lets out one of his famous woohoos. He continues to do things that ruin their chances at survival by doing things like eating all the rations, wasting all their water, and shooting a rescue helicopter out of the sky with a flare gun. All hope appears to be lost as a thick fog rolls in. All four characters look weak, tired, and like they've given up hope. Homer tells Bart he'd gotten a gift for him and shows him a pocket knife. They have a heartfelt moment that's ruined when Homer drops the open pocket knife and punctures a hole in the boat. Luckily, they all smell hamburgers, and with Homer's keen nose, they all use their strength to steer them to a Krusty Burger that's on an oil rig. The two hug and finally get the food so desperately needed. And that's the end of the video. Comment any episodes you think I've missed, and subscribe for more Simpsons content.